Hey everyone, Dr. Josh Axe here. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast. Today I have a good friend of mine, Dr. Will Colon. Dr. Will has been ranked one of the top 50 functional and integrative medicine doctors in the world. And he really focuses on a number of conditions, especially though autoimmune conditions, thyroid issues, hormonal imbalances, digestive disorders, and neurological issues. And he's also the host of the very popular Art of Wellbeing podcast. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He's authored books like Intuitive Fasting, Ketotarian, and The Inflammation Spectrum. And he's got a new book out called Gut Feelings, where he dives deep into gut health. And so today we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about the keto diet. We're going to talk about intermittent fasting. We're going to talk about inflammation, gut health, blood work, men versus women, methylation, fertility, and is functional medicine affordable? All that and a lot more today on the podcast. Will, welcome to the show.
We're going to cover so many things. People are going to love it. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, excited to chat. You know, I know we were actually just hanging out here a few days ago in Nashville, and we said, hey, we should have done this in person, but you know what? We're doing what we can now. So, and that was a great time. You know, we did a dinner. If you're ever in Nashville, and well, Will's going to be there a lot. His son's going to be going to school in Nashville, and there's a restaurant we eat at constantly. If you're in Nashville, you got to check out Urban Market. It's in the southern part called Franklin. But Will and I have eaten there now several times together, and it's a great spot. So Urban Market, Nashville, if you're ever there, and the Nashville food scene is fantastic. Will, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm thinking of maybe getting a room in the back of the Urban Market kitchen and just like bunking up while I'm there for convenience only.
Well, I think at the very least, well, if you don't do that, the thing I'd also like to see is maybe you and Amber, and the fam get a second home in Nashville so we can hang out more. So
let's try to make it happen.
All right. Well, one of the things I know that you've been addressing a lot lately, and I think it's something that some people have questions on, is the affordability of functional medicine care. You know, obviously today, if somebody goes into their conventional doctor, you're going to get, and by the way, when I say this is a blanket statement, but oftentimes the care is inferior, because when you go into a conventional medical doctor, what happens today most often is they're just going to prescribe a drug and that's it. And so oftentimes, if you're going to get functional or integrative medicine, you're going to pay more because those doctors are not following those standards. They're doing something different with recommending food and supplements and diet, and it's a very different type of care. But I think a lot of people want functional medicine care. I think maybe there is some concern about affordability. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Will?
It's something that I get posed. The questions are posed oftentimes when I write on social media or write an article or on the podcast. People will say, yes, all that sounds great about functional medicine, but they'll be thrown, judgments that it's inaccessible, it's not affordable, it's just for the elite, it's just for the wealthy, it's just for the famous. And I had a few, celebrity clients, telehealth patients over the years, and then that becomes the poster child for who functional medicine is helping. I mean, I think that's a testament to, media and the narratives of all of that, because the reality is 99% of my patients are regular, everyday 9 to 5 people, and statistically, our top professions for telehealth patients have been school teachers, nurses, entrepreneurs, startup people in startup, and engineers, interestingly enough. And I found that beyond the fact that they are regular 9 to 5 people, middle class people, they also have a love of spreadsheets in those professions and getting to the root cause and actually asking why, like what's the root cause of why I have this. But there are people that are just their why is bigger than their excuses. And I think that we have to realize that America, and I'm going to talk about generalities and specifics, I think that America as a whole, we spend more on healthcare than the next 10 top spending countries combined.
Really?
Yet we have the most disease and the shortest lifespan of all industrialized nations. And there are certainly exceptions to what I'm saying, right? There are people that functional medicine isn't accessible for. But normally, those aren't the people that are complaining. The people that are complaining on social media about accessibility don't flinch about buying the latest iPhone or going on their vacations or their fast food apps, or they're buying, drinking alcohol and spending it. So I think we have a massive issue in the United States of a priority problem on valuing health. And when you look at the statistics, they speak for themselves. We love our materialistic stuff in this country, but we don't value health. So I have strong opinions about this. With that said, are there people that we need to help and we need to do better to make functional medicine more accessible and more affordable? Certainly. And I've been in telehealth for a long time. That's like 14 years. And we've done a lot to come up with different paths for people to make functional medicine more accessible and more affordable, because I know we want to do better and we want to meet people where they're at and to democratize functional medicine as much as possible. But I think that we need to have a robust conversation about this, because it's very easy to say functional medicine's inaccessible, but it's actually not true when you look a little bit deeper.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about too. Like there's functional medicine in terms of the actual appointments you have. So it could be going into a brick and mortar, could be an osteopath, a chiropractor, MD, whatever type of physician is doing that functional medicine consultation. And oftentimes maybe doing blood work, or maybe just sitting down and doing some dietary advice and supplementation recommendations. And of course, the same thing can be done virtually. But I think that there's a lot of things that people can benefit from without even necessarily seeing a practitioner, that functional medicine practitioners teach. Of course, you and I, like, we're doing this show for free. Like, we're putting out, like, I know you write articles, you and I do podcasts. We do everything we can to just get this information out, because it's saved my, in a way, my life, my mom's life. It's helped transform the lives of millions of people. And so I think the other thing, just for everybody listening, if you're concerned with the cost, well, do everything you can that the functional medicine practitioners like Dr. Will and I are saying. Everything from, hey, doing some periodic fasting, thinking of your food as medicine, right? So getting those foods in, looking at what the most common supplements are and supplemental deficiencies, especially magnesium and vitamin D. So I could go on there, but all that being said, if you can't get functional medicine care, then do your best to listen to the practitioners. And the other thing is, as Dr. Will was saying, it's just so important to prioritize. I think when people tend to really look at their budget and think about, where does my health rank in all of this, and what are some things I can give up, then oftentimes there's room for in the budget for functional medicine.
Yeah, there is. And you're absolutely right. I'm glad you brought up the fact of podcasts. And we have some people that will complain about the sponsors on the podcast, but I'm like, that's how we can make this free. Like, it's free because they're the brands that I would recommend anyways, but it's making it free for everybody.
Well, and I'll tell you what's interesting too. One of the things I've mentioned this a couple times on my podcast, the Dr. Josh Yak Show, but I've mentioned that if you subscribe or like this channel, or again, you buy from any of the companies that we sponsor, you actually allow the show to grow and even allow us to bring on better guests in the future. Because the more that you and I have our shows grow in the top 50 in iTunes or so, then we're better able to bring on really high profile celebrities. Again, you have Gwyneth Paltrow on, you've had her on several times. I've had people like Carrie Underwood on, and because those people, now, one, they're friends. And so that's part of why they came on our shows. Also, I think there's a level of respect for what we do. But my point there is people have to know when you engage with the show and you subscribe and you support it in any way, we're going to bring on better and better guests in the future. And so just so everybody listening knows, that's one of the things that Dr. Will and I are committed to, is we're in this industry because we want to help people heal, and we want to put together and put out the best possible education for everyone listening.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, articles are another good example. We put so much free content out, and books are low cost, at least for people. Yeah. And on top of that, like, we've reimagined how we do care to make functional medicine lower cost for people on that. And like, there's so much we can do to reimagine how we can be there for you. So yeah, it's definitely a new age in that way, where maybe it was true before, where you had to go to a brick and mortar clinic and it's like it was really expensive, but there's so much innovative ways and that we can be there for you on different levels, whether it is a proper telehealth relationship or it's, books and podcasts and articles.
Yeah. Dr. Will, one of the things that I've always really respected about you is that, one, again, our friendship, I know we share the same values, I think, in terms of just wanting to be very purpose driven in our lives and a lot of, whether it's faith or family values or health values. And again, I've known you, I remember the first time we met, I think it was at Paleo FX in Austin, going to True Food Kitchen and having dinner and hanging out. And so I've known you for a while. I know we run in the same circle. Dan Pompa's another guy, Dr. Pompa, that we've known. And, and you've always been very holistic in nature. I think, when you're caring for patients, you're aware that this person in front of me, I need to take care of their physical health, but also their mental health, their spiritual health. It's important that I'm caring for that as well. And I want to mention something that a lot of people may not know is that you lost your father about a year ago, just a little over a year. And I know that this is something where, again, I was praying for your family. I know a lot of people were who knew you personally, but obviously to go through a loss like that can be incredibly hard. I know that you've cared for patients that have been through things like divorce or the loss of someone really close to them. And those things can be very, very hard on someone's health in a lot of those areas. What are some things that you've learned as you've gone through that recovery process that maybe you could share with us that would be important for both body, healing in body, mind, and spirit?
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, it was sudden. It was a car accident for people that are wondering. It was a car accident last year, and it was obviously sudden. He was 63 years old and was driving to pick my mom up at the airport and lost control of the car and crashed into a tree. So it was traumatic. I mean, losing someone like that is never easy for anybody, no matter what. But it's definitely extra different. I should say, just different when it's sudden and traumatic like that. And not to get too gruesome for people, but like we had to go into the room with his battered body lying on a metal table, and like that's the last time you saw him from a car accident. So it's definitely heavy stuff. And then it's my mom's life reimagined of what she was going to spend. This was the golden years of what people work for to go into retirement. And it was definitely just not what she expected. So it's unpacking all of that, metabolizing that stress and trauma as we speak. Like I'm in the thick of it, and knowing what I know, because of what I kind of mentioned when I do with patients. You're right. I've seen so much people go through a divorce or a stressful time at work or a loss of a loved one or caretaking for a loved one, and what that can do to the physical health. I'm not above that. And I was definitely going through it. And just further context, professionally, my book was coming out in 3 weeks after all of that happened with my dad. So that's on top of running the telehealth clinic. It was just a lot. So I actually said no to a lot of promotion for Gut Feelings, because the irony of all ironies is the book was about stress and trauma and of how it impacts physical health. So I'm there releasing and talking about a book as I was going through it. And it wasn't just some clinical thing that I would be talking about anymore. It was something that I was living through. So I had to practice what I teach, and knew what my body needed is just to slow down wherever I could and create healthy boundaries as much as I could. And it wasn't perfect. In hindsight, I was like, I could have probably done a lot more. But I've said no to a lot of travel. I've said no to a lot of public speaking events. Because I just knew my nervous system couldn't handle it, and I needed to just be home and here as much as I could to lower my stress as much as possible. So I would just say to anybody that's going through that, be easy on yourself. We all could do better. It's like as you're navigating through that, there's no playbook. There's no like right way to do it. But saying no is a powerful tool. And especially if you're used to saying yes to a lot of things, it doesn't have to be as traumatic as like losing a loved one. It could just be you're stressed at work, and saying, like, letting no be your multivitamin. I always tell patients, like, use it daily.
That's good. Wow.
Use it daily and often, be consistent with it, and not being no for the sake of it, but being okay, it's nothing personal, but I just can't be all things to everybody right now. And, it's that cliche of you can only give what you have. And that's definitely true here. For you to be the best spouse, partner, employee, friend, family member, whatever, you have to have something to give. And when you are running on empty, you're not going to be of service to anybody.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the one of the things that I'm aware of anytime we've gone through anything that has been difficult is that taking time to pause, reflect, look back at it causes you to reevaluate your priorities and spend time with what matters. I think a lot of times it's pressing more into family and faith during those times, and as you said, giving yourself some room for your health, because this is of course a stressor, but also looking at those people around you, how you can support them. One of the things that I loved that you and your brothers did for your mom is that I know, last month you guys all went on a family cruise. How many were on this cruise? Because there was a lot of a Disney cruise, right?
Yeah, it didn't sound fun to you or anybody else that I told, but it was 27 of us on a Disney cruise, and sounds maybe like horrendous to some people, but it was actually such a fun time and busy. It was very busy, and it was definitely not like chill with tons of toddlers and school age kids running around, but it was so special. And you know what? It's the silver lining. It's never going to bring my dad back. It's never like, wow, I'm glad that had to happen for this to happen. But some small redemption, whereas I don't know if that would have happened if my dad was still here. In a way, it's like this beauty can come from that pain, where it's like, and hopefully more moments like that. Like you said, I think it was a awakening to what matters and the brevity of life and the sacredness of life, and not letting the days and the years pass by without being intentional with what matters.
Yeah, and sometimes when there's a loss, what people will do is they'll throw themselves into something else like work. So they'll actually try and do more to numb the pain. And so your prescription here, in a way, or recommendation is, do less. It's okay to mourn. Press into family at this time. I know, as you did, and I think it's great advice and incredibly healing. You'd mentioned your book, Gut Feelings. I know that this is a book that you and I really share this in common, and really understanding the importance of gut health. When we look at a lot of these statistics today on nutritional deficiencies, or it could be, improper methylation pathways, a number of things. Much of it is still tied to gut health. I don't think people actually, even with methylation, realize that it's how well are, of course there's a genetic component, but even there's a level of the health of your cells in your digestive system that still can increase your body's ability to methylate properly. When you wrote that book, what were some of your top recommendations for, and again, I know part of it was gut health, but there was also, as you mentioned, overcoming mental health challenges, those sort of things. What is the biggest takeaway, if you could summarize that book or give some recommendations that you covered in Gut Feelings?
Mm-hmm. So the book I call it Gut Feelings for different reasons, right? There's this bidirectional relationship between our gut and our feelings, and gut as literally our gastrointestinal system, but also the sort of avatar for physical health. Like how in the West, we'll oftentimes separate mental health and physical health and relegate mental health as a separate, abstract, conceptual thing. But mental health is physical health. And in Gut Feelings, I was talking about the research of how the gut, but also many other physiological things, will impact our mental emotional health. One of the things I talk about is what researchers call the cytokine model of cognitive function. Cytokines are pro-inflammatory cells. So it's research looking at how does inflammation impact how our brain works, but then also underlying gut problems or nutrient deficiencies or chronic infections like viral issues or bacterial issues or biotoxins like mold toxins. These are things that you can quantify on labs, that we quantify on labs. How do those things impact our mental emotional health? How does it impact things like anxiety and depression, or just maybe you not feeling your best? And then conversely, how do the mental, emotional, spiritual things impact our physical health? So I talk about the research of trauma and even intergenerational trauma and the science around that and how that impacts things like autoimmune problems and metabolic issues and gut health problems. So gut feelings is talking about the gut and the feelings, the physical and then the mental, emotional, spiritual. And then these cliches that we have in, our common vernacular that we don't even think about, like gut feelings or gut instincts or butterflies in my stomach or I just feel it in my gut, that somehow our ancestors knew that the gut played in some way as the seat of the soul. And now research is catching up with antiquity, that we have so much research looking at how does the gut impact our mood. And we're just scraping the surface of the profundity and the depth of this fact. So it was exploring both sides of that coin, the gut and the feelings in that book. So again, going through what I was going through when the book was coming out was like the weirdest thing, very meta in the weirdest way, where it's like, all right, I need to do the protocol in the book as it's coming out, because it was heavy for sure.
Yeah. I know one of your recommendations, and I've recommended this for certain people for certain periods of time, for healing the gut and helping, help with cytokines, really reduce inflammation, is fasting. I'm curious on your thoughts on fasting at this point in time. I think mine have continued to develop and probably aligns more with probably what's recommended in sort of ancient Asian medicine. But I know that there's a lot of thoughts around fasting. What are your recommendations and thoughts around fasting? And the second part of the question would be, who is fasting not for? Who shouldn't be fasting?
I think first it's defining where do we lean into fasting? Where does the definition of fasting come into play? Because I have a broad term for it of any time without food. So I think the fasting aficionado biohacker out there may not consider what I consider fasting, because if you look at gentle time compressed feeding or time restricted feeding, of just the basic advice of allowing a couple of hours before you go to bed, and eating a couple of hours before you go to bed, to allow mainly fasting through the night, and you're just avoiding those late night snacks. Things that impact digestion, impact insulin, impact autophagy, these longevity pathways through the night. To me, that's going to be applicable to pretty much everybody, right? I mean, there's anybody that's going to be pretty decent advice. I'm assuming we can find exceptions, but for the most part, that's a human advice. But from there, where do we contract that eating window? And, I wrote the book previous to Gut Feelings. I called it Intuitive Fasting for that reason, because I want there to be a grace and a flexibility and a lightness and a check in with you to see what's right for your body. And also, what serves you now isn't necessarily what you're going to have to do forever and ever. Like, be okay with to shake things up and pivot and evolve in your understanding of what works for your body, because these are therapeutic tools. So therapeutic tools, if they're done right, they're going to be supporting something. They're going to be optimizing something. They're going to be healing something. So what you may have needed more of a therapeutic tool at some point in your life, but that season is over, and it's okay to not do intermittent fasting, or just, like, as I mentioned, not eat too late at night and allow your body to fast just through the night. So it's a medicine, right? It's Paracelsus talked about this, the father of toxicology in Switzerland in the late 1400s, early 1500s. He called fasting the physician within, which I think is a beautiful way of putting it. It's like, yes, there's a time where we need this physician within, but there's a time when we don't need this physician within. And so to answer the second part of your question, who should or shouldn't, that's the question, is who are you? What are you going through? What are your goals? And then what type of fasting are you doing? Those are all variables that determine the context of this conversation. You can make big statements. I think that women that are cycling should be more judicious and extra intuitive with that, and doing a more of a cyclical fasting approach around their menstrual cycle, or at least weekly, is going to benefit them. But if she's cycling, but she has PCOS or insulin, some other form of insulin resistance or another inflammatory problem, but she's still cycling, she may need more of that physician within than a woman that's cycling without those problems. So I think it's still overly reductive for us to say, well, cycling women shouldn't do it. It's like, who is she? What is she going through? What are the other variables where fasting may have an advantage for her? So it's so bio-individual.
Yeah, I agree. There's a high level of being bio-individual there, and I think one of the things I think that I have realized is that fasting is great for a lot of people, but again, it's super bio-individual. And I think that some people can do well with intermittent fasting. I think some people shouldn't do intermittent fasting. And so when I use intermittent fasting, I would tend to put that more in that 8-16 window versus what Will's saying. I think everybody could benefit. And this is a principle of Chinese medicine is that you really should not eat and then go to bed within 3 hours. Okay. So it's that 3 hours or less. So if you eat at 6, go to bed at 9, but it's going and just laying down flat on your back or on your side. The ideal is you get that 3 hour between. Now, 2 hours is better than 1 hour, of course, as well. And then the other thing is that, you can give yourself a little time in the morning, but eating around 8 or 9 o'clock. I mean, so if you're eating dinner around 6, or even 5, and then you are, eating around 8, you're still really fasting for 14 hours a day and only eating on 10. And so you can still get in a lot of protein, and some of the things your body needs to regulate itself. And the other thing is, fasting can be a form of stress. When you look at the Jews and early Christians, I mean, they really had a lot of rhythms for fasting. And even today, some do, but we do it a lot less. There's a lot more, a lot less of these rituals that people have still held on to. For instance, early church, we saw, they would fast not daily, but on Wednesdays and Fridays, they would eat dinner, but not eat breakfast or lunch. And so there was 2 of the 5 days or the 7 days they would. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of ways to do that. But I think I'm a little bit more attracted to that now that I've studied hormesis, because I think you're getting a lot of those benefits of that metabolic flexibility sometimes with doing it a few days a week rather than every day. But anyways, I think it's so important and this is why I love the title of your book, Will, Intuitive Eating, Awareness. Listen to your body, try some of these things out, see what you do well with, and then adopt the approach that's best for you. Will, one of the things you've done is you've built up an incredibly successful online virtual clinic and helped so many people get well, meeting with them, via Zoom. In fact, you were one of the first people that I knew to really start a virtual practice that was based within using a functional medicine framework. And I know with that, sometimes you'll do blood work. You take care of a lot of women and some men as well. What are some of the labs you like to run and why on women? And then how is that different than the labs you run with men?
Yeah. Well, I think I would say this, for everybody, it's going to be pretty simple. Let me back up a little bit. I think that all of this is predicated on a comprehensive, thoughtful health history. And then from that, you would determine labs, right? But I will say, let's talk about for everybody and then the nuance, I think, between genders. I think the first is, this is a human problem. 93% of the United States has a massive metabolic problem. They are somewhere on that insulin resistance spectrum. That's almost everybody. It's insane. And so we want to see where you're at in that spectrum, if you are, right? But statistically, it's a lot of people. So we want to look at optimal, not average. I mean, most people that are listening right now know the labs reference range is based on a statistical average of people who go to labs. People that go to labs aren't the healthiest people, sadly. So we want to look at a thinner range within that larger reference range. Where does optimal wellness reside? That's where we get our name in functional medicine. Where is your body functioning the best? Where does longevity, where does health span reside? It's going to be a tighter interval within that larger reference range. So we're looking at optimal, not average. So the first set of labs, I'll say briefly, is like they're just conventional labs that are looked at through the lens of optimal, not average. So any doctor, even a non-functional medicine doctor, can run these labs, and then you can interpret them for yourself. And we have all these ranges at drwillcole.com. They can just search anything with so many articles they can go and find. But basically, a comprehensive metabolic panel is a good place to start. That's looking at things like glucose, blood sugar, your fasting blood sugar. It's looking at your A1C, which is a 3-month average of your blood sugar. We want glucose to be under 90, A1C be under 5.5. And then we'll be looking at liver enzymes. The body has these brilliant compensatory mechanisms that when the body's insulin resistant, you're going to see some changes for a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot of people. You're going to start seeing suboptimal liver enzymes, spiked AST and ALT being elevated, even suboptimal. Why? Well, for many people that are insulin resistant, it's because the body starts storing blood sugar as fat around the liver, and you can get what's called fatty liver problems. And you'll see the AST and the ALT spiking. You'll also see triglycerides or circulating fat above 100 because the body starts, again, brilliantly beautiful. It's storing the blood sugar as triglycerides. So that's why you see the triglyceride spiked, because it's trying to store something that's toxic, i.e. blood sugar being elevated. So it's kind of like Paul Revere from a cardiometabolic standpoint is slightly elevated liver enzymes, high triglycerides, years prior to somebody being diagnosable as a type 2 diabetic. So you can start seeing, am I on this insulin resistance spectrum? Even before A1C goes above optimal.
Well, and I want to mention why this is so important, what you're talking about with insulin resistance. A lot of times people's heads just jump to diabetes. But, when you look at Alzheimer's disease, we'll call that type 2 diabetes, or I'm sorry, type 3 diabetes. Yeah. We could call PCOS type 4 diabetes. I mean, there's a lot of conditions that are infertility. I've seen it to where that's an insulin issue. I mean, we've seen numerous things, as you mentioned, that are insulin related issues. And so continue on. I just wanted to mention that why you testing insulin and these other markers, why that's so important.
Yeah, profoundly important. As you mentioned, like it could even be someone that's fatigued, right? They may think, oh, I'm just getting older. No, your insulin resistance is driving the brain fog and the fatigue, or the low libido. It could be insulin resistance that's driving the libido. Just because something's common doesn't necessarily make it normal. And these things you can see on that spectrum between health and health problems based on these snapshots in time. So I would look at that, look at inflammation markers, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, we went under 1, homocysteine, we went under 7. So even there's a study published a few years ago looking at suboptimal homocysteine levels and acting as a neurotoxin and increasing blood-brain barrier permeability. As most people have heard of leaky gut syndrome, they can also have what's called leaky brain syndrome. Things getting into the blood-brain barrier, creating neuroinflammation, which is what's tied to brain fog, fatigue, and all of these things. And the title of the study says mild cognitive impairment, suboptimal homocysteine levels. So just things like brain fog. I'm not feeling as sharp as I once was. So you can see we want homocysteine to be under 7 in functional medicine, the optimal range. So those are some good markers. And if you look at between men and women, I think the biggest thing is just the interpretation of the labs. Their reference ranges are obviously going to be different. But because of this level of insulin resistance, many guys will have what's known as over aromatization. So they will convert testosterone into estrogen. So you'll see estrogen dominance relative to testosterone because of this insulin resistance. Then the liver is stressed out. They're making this enzyme called aromatase, and they have high estrogen. So that's why they have trouble losing weight. They have other metabolic problems there. Again, common, not normal. And then women can be having the opposite problem in some ways. They have androgen dominance, and that you can see that with PCOS.
Yeah, I'm curious with men that are coming in, getting blood work, what percentage of them do you see with lower than optimal testosterone levels?
Yeah, and I have I'm not seeing the average Westerner out there. So I'm seeing people that obviously they're not feeling the best.
Yeah.
And now it could be a suboptimal, or really they know there's something wrong, but it's almost all of them. I mean, it's almost every guy that I see has low testosterone, but we know it's not just people that go to functional medicine doctors problem. Statistically, we're seeing this around. That's why we see all the low T commercials out there, because this is a universal problem. And, people are trying to come up with solutions, whether it's a hormone replacement therapy or some drug or medication. But we have to ask the question, why? Why? And oftentimes insulin resistance is at least a component to why we're seeing this epidemic rise of these hormonal problems in men and women.
Yeah, one of the markers I'm curious if you run, do you run any sort of, DNA panel looking at methylation?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we do. So this is an interesting thing when you're looking at like the general pie chart, Venn diagram. you could estimate for a lot of these problems when you're looking at cardiometabolic issues, and that's diabetes, right? Insulin resistance, things that increase heart attack and stroke. Insulin resistance doubles our risk for heart attack and stroke. But then you look at autoimmune problems, and there's over 100 different ones of those. Like for people that don't know, it's things like lupus, Sjogren's, Hashimoto's, autoimmune thyroiditis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, MS, so things like that, right? So the commonality between a lot of these issues is inflammation. There's inflammation is a component of that. So we have to understand what's causing that inflammation. We have to look at both epigenetics and genetics. So epigenetics, for most people, depending on the study that you look at, it's anywhere between, like, I think around 60% to a lot higher than that, 75, 90, 91% of how healthy somebody is, depending on the study that you cite. Epigenetics, meaning lifestyle stuff that you have some agency over stuff. It's determined not by genetics, but by epigenetics. So a lot of the labs that we would run and looking at gut health, chronic infections, nutrient deficiencies, those are some things that are immutable. They're things that you have some agency over and you can optimize and support and all those good things within health and wellness and functional medicine. But about a third, depending on the study that you look at, about a third of that's genetics. So to ignore genetics entirely isn't accurate either. So the analogy that's typically used in this way is that genetics loads the gun, but epigenetics pulls the trigger. To use that, analogy, is that epigenetics are part of that, but we have to look at what's loading the gun, and genetics does play a role at that. So we look at raw genetic data to look at things like methylation, which methylation is just a big interconnected, sophisticated superhighway of different processes of donating basically carbon hydrogen groups that we need to either recycle something down, make different amino acids and building blocks for our tissue. So in practical terms, I think of methylation as the way that your body cleans house, detoxes. It also builds a healthy brain, healthy hormones, healthy gut lining, healthy immune system, healthy cardiovascular health. That's how important methylation is. It's just fundamental to human existence. But we also look at detox pathways, like different CYP, liver detox genes. And we also look at something called HLA genes, which stands for human leukocyte antigens, which is the way that your body handles foreign invaders, basically different bacteria, viruses, and mold toxins or mycotoxins. Some people are just genetically more prone to being sensitive to those things. Yeah. So that helps you understand your own bioindividuality when you look at the genetics as well as the epigenetics, because that's why some people can have a reaction to certain things and some people won't. So it's not fair to say, well, I mean, mold is a good example here, is that you'll have a spouse that has the HLA and the methylation gene variants, and she's really responding to the mold, even low amounts of mold. She has brain fog fatigue. It's triggering some inflammatory problem, but her husband, to use his example, doesn't have those same gene variants, and he thinks unknowingly, he's not trying to be a jerk, but he's kind of being a jerk to her because he's like, you're a hypochondriac. There's nothing wrong here. It's just, there's mold is everywhere, but it's bioindividuality. He does not have the same gene variants as she does. So I think it's really empowering and helpful for family dynamics sometimes to understand that, she's not having the same reactions as you because she's not you. And that applies to many different examples, not just to mold, but to many other aspects of health.
Yeah, and obviously it's important. And I think this is one of the things that really, as we started the conversation, sets functional medicine apart is when it's done the way that I think you and I practice, we're really looking at the individual. Now, I know you and I have written books on, keto diet. And by the way, I wrote a book on keto because my publisher was like, would you please write a book on keto? I'm like, well, I don't really want to. They're like, please. I'm like, okay. So I ended up writing a book, how to do it. And a lot of my method was, you've had this happen to you. You've written a lot of books. And so I said the way that keto should be done is, it should be thought as doing a fast or a cleanse or a program for a period of time for most people. Hey, maybe 30 days, maybe 90 days, even a certain period of time for certain conditions like MS or epilepsy or some of those issues, right? And so I think that there are times and places to do those sort of things. I bring that all up to say not everybody should be on that. And I think that there are doctors out there that get sort of sucked into these diet fads where it's like every single person ever should be on paleo. Everyone should be vegan or everyone should be keto. I think one of the things you and I realize, and by the way, I think you and I realize this because you and I have worked with patients. I think that there are some people maybe who haven't maybe worked with as many patients and with a lot of diverse backgrounds. Like I'm thinking about somebody who has worked with patients, but they only work with heart patients alone and they're only trying to prevent heart issues. Versus you and I have seen sort of everything under the sun, from cancer to heart disease to diabetes to Crohn's disease to hypothyroidism to acne. And so I know, and I think you've seen this too, to where, I mean, it's everybody is unique and responds differently. And having a doctor that can meet those needs, if you have a functional medicine doctor that really practices cellular medicine or more specifically personalized medicine, you're likely to get the best results because you really need something that's custom for your unique genetics and epigenetics and patterns that you currently are expressing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm kind of regressing here, but that your book, your publishers asked you to write it, and now it's like a gold standard in like the keto diet world. You did a great job with that book. But yeah, anyways, and if anybody, it's so funny, right? I had Ketotarian, you have your keto diet book. People that just judged a book by its cover, they would say, these guys just think keto should be for everybody. But then the cliche stands true here. If they actually read our books, they'd see how we use this tool.
Yeah.
What is the way that you use this tool? And it's not a blanket statement of like, this is for everybody or it's for nobody. And that you'll get that a lot is like you'll have the people that are like in this camp for this one way and someone that says, no, this is bad for everybody. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's like, how are they using this thing? How are they using this tool within the toolbox? And I think a lot of this conversation overlaps with intermittent fasting, right? Because the ketogenic diet is fasting mimicking, right? So it's mimicking some of the benefits of fasting or all the benefits of fasting without actually fasting. So I think that this same thing that I think about intermittent fasting, I think about keto for that reason, because you're tapping into this physician within and you're tapping into what's known as the fourth macronutrient. You know, if you have protein, fats, carbs, and ketones, beta hydroxybutyrate, the main ketone, it's not just a way to burn fat. It's an epigenetic modulator. It's lowering inflammation. It's improving brain function. It's working on these longevity pathways. There are therapeutic use for that, but you don't always need it. And you don't always need to be in ketosis. And some people, it may have more drawbacks than potential gains. So you kind of have to weigh, as you kind of echoed, what is your goal here and how do you use it? But I think the average person, if they're not going through a neurological issue, if they're not going through, wild autoimmune flares, obviously the seizures as being a part of that neurological issue, I see those type of people tend to want to lean on ketosis as a therapeutic tool for longer and maybe indefinitely, because when they lean out of ketosis, they don't feel as well. So try to tell that person, no, it's not good to be in ketosis long term. No, they know their body and they'll tell you they don't feel as good when they're leaning out of that. So those are not everybody. The average person that's interested in seeing, biohacking or burning fat, becoming a fat burner, I see it to be best used in a cyclical fashion, whether it's weekly or around their menstrual cycle or seasonally. It's like, even from an ancestral standpoint, humans, depending on where your ancestors lived, they would have been more in ketosis during the winter months and then had seasonal fruits and tubers in the summer months. So these are the type of things that I talked about in Ketotarian to show people how you use this tool. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah, it's great. Well, what is something that you've been learning about recently? I know you and I are learners. We're always reading. We're always diving into, the latest medical study, the latest books and research on, functional medicine. What is something you've learned recently that's got you excited that may be of value for everyone to hear about?
Yeah, I mean, so much, right? It's obviously the research around longevity is fascinating to me in different ways you can support longevity, and these senescent cells, that the fact that these zombie cells are called in the research, and they're a normal part of life, but not in excess. And most people have these accumulation of these senescent cells, and they release these pro-inflammatory cytokines. So a lot of the tools that we talked about in today's conversation, one of the ways they benefit people, whether that be intermittent fasting or a cyclical intuitive fasting and a cyclical ketogenic diet, are just two of many, 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 many different ways for you to decrease those zombie cells. And they're called zombie cells because they don't die. They're resisting apoptosis. They're resisting cell death. So if you want a clean house, you need to tap into this physician within. Those are one ways to do it, to recycle those senescent cells.
Yeah.
Sirtuins are another thing that's ways to support sirtuin activity. These are the guardians of our genome, the guardians of our DNA. So a lot of the tools that I mentioned increase, the way they help us is they're increasing these protectors to cells, the sirtuin proteins or enzymes. So that's another thing that I'm interested in, just geeking out, for lack of better words, of how amazing the body is. And look, if you didn't look at that granular data and you just say, no, I felt better, that's enough for most people. But if you're like a super health nerd, you can look into like, oh, why do I feel better? And these mechanisms of action. And those are two things that are interesting to me. And then something that I talk about in Gut Feelings that I find fascinating is the science around intergenerational trauma, or they call it transgenerational trauma.
Yes.
It's just like powerful stuff. And like coming from where we come, where it's like in the Old Testament, where it talks about the sins of the fathers and it passing down through generation.
The third
and
and fourth generation. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like, all right, in the church or in certain churches, they would call it generational curses, right? And even in Judaism, they call it generational curses. Well, science is catching up with that spiritual wisdom. Is that not that they're curses? Let me be clear that word is not what I'm talking about here. But what I'm saying is that we are in many ways living out the life and experiences of our ancestors. And science is now showing that in methylation. What we talked about earlier. Science is showing is methylation gene changes epigenetically, it's expressing in different ways. And this is research out of looking at Holocaust survivors in Poland and Germany, the Holodomor, which is a man-made Russian, Ukrainian genocide in the early 20th century, and the Rwandan genocide in the Hutus and the Tutsis in the 90s. And they looked at methylation changes in the people that went through it, and they saw the same changes in their kids and then their grandkids. Pretty profound stuff. And what does that mean? That means that they're more likely to have autoimmune problems, metabolic issues, digestive problems, mental health issues. So then somebody that could hear that research may feel like, man, I'm screwed, right? If I not only have to worry about my health and my choices, I have to worry about my great grandparents. But I think I see it the opposite way. I see it as like, wow, hopefully, it's some grace and forgiveness on yourself, that it's not all about what you've done. You're not broken. And we all come in with different things to deal with. But as trauma can be inherited, so can healing. And you can break that cycle just as much as anybody else.
It's amazing. I'm so glad you brought this up, because there are two perspectives of it. One is I'm a victim of what my parents and great grandparents and their parents did. And another one is, wow, when I do something good for my health, it's not only good for me, it's good for 4 generations. It's good for their kids and their grandkids you'll never even meet, likely in the future. Yeah. And so, using that, that suffering and pain and turning that into purpose and helping others. And that's powerful. And that's important for your own healing. I think when I've seen patients, when they live in that victim mentality, it's much harder for them to heal versus when they're able to embrace this heroic mindset of everything I do is not only for my good, but more so for the good of everyone else around me. Yeah. And even eating to live, or eating so your descendants can live, is a really, really powerful idea. I want to circle back to the first thing we talked about, Dr. Well, here, and that is, we talked about the affordability of functional medicine. Can you share with us some of it could be your top 3, top 5, whatever you want it to be, some of the top things people can do for very low cost or even for free to take their health to the next level, that's based on a wise voice from you in functional medicine? Yeah,
I would say, looking at, most of your listeners will know this, but I want to start here just briefly. I would say look at what I call the inflammatory core 4 plus 1. If you could add one, there's no rhyming pithy thing for me to say. Inflammatory core 4 plus 1. Anyways, industrial seed oils would be one. Looking at that now. Let's look at nuance and context. There are better for you versions of industrial seed oils, like organic versions of them, I would agree are better. But looking at things like canola oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil as a part of it. Now, are they bad? Are they the demon? No. It's the overconsumption of packaged foods that includes those. And the modern Western diet is out of balance when it comes to its omega-3, 6, and 9. So we're not eating enough long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, and we're eating too much omega-6 oils that are processed, and they can be oxidized as well. So looking at industrial seed oils, looking at added sugar, even the nicer sounding euphemisms for sugar that can be greenwashed very easily on a label and look healthier, but are still refined sugar. 3 would be conventional dairy, and you and I are the same. We agree on the same on this. It's like there are better for you versions of dairy, but it's not the dairy so much as what we've done to the dairy, and we've crossbred the cows. Most cows are beta A1 casein. They're not A2 casein. So the ancestral, which you've been talking about this for a long time, like the original casein. Let's go there because it's this epigenetic genetic mismatch. Our microbiome, our gut health is digesting this new casein on the block that it's not used to digesting. So decreasing that chasm, having A2 and even cultured A2 would be even better because it's breaking down some of the dairy protein. But looking at yogurts and kefirs and cheeses and A2 milks full fat A2 milks can be really well digested, but the conventional dairy is not so much. So that would be third. And then gluten containing grains. And is it the grain or is it what we've done to it? We're spraying it with stuff. We are hybridizing it. We're bleaching it. We're not soaking and sprouting it. So there's a nuance to all of those things, but I would look at the not so good versions of all of those things and saying, am I eating too much of these for my body? And maybe I need to get rid of them entirely or at least decrease it. And then the plus 1 is alcohol, which I never gain friends when I talk about it, but the healthiest amount of alcohol is none. So I would look at is that, and I see this within the health world, and I know you see it too. It's like they won't eat those 4 things I just said, but they'll still have the wine every night. And they think, well, it's organic. And then they don't realize they can't lose the weight, or they don't know why they still have the brain fog, or they're not sleeping well, or they have the digestive problems. Look at wine and other alcohol and its place in your life. And is it loving you back or not? And so I'd say look at those, and then what you can do, I'd say bring in soups and stews are one of the best things, right? Or if you can't get soups and stews, get those amazing. Obviously, I love what you all are doing with the bone broth powder and all the collagen powders. Bring more collagenic rich foods in your life, and a mixture of convenient options, and then get creative in the kitchen and learning how to have more soups and stews, easy to digest vegetables, proteins into your diet. Most of those are free or low cost things, affordable for most people.
It's great.
Yeah. And then some free stuff, I'll just say quickly on the feeling side of gut feelings is forest bathing. The research around in Japan, they call it Shinrin Yoku, or it translates as forest bathing from Japanese to English. It's using nature as a medicine and meditation. It's just getting out in nature, walking, not just hiking, but walking intentionally, taking in nature with all of your senses. It's been shown to shift our microbiome, which improves our mental health, improving our immune system because we're breathing in this microbiome. And then breath work, and educate yourself on different breath work techniques. And something that I talk about in the book is practicing self-compassion, these are powerful tools to lower inflammation. Powerful tools. And they're completely free.
Yeah, it's great advice. Great advice. I want to mention everybody, hey, check out Dr. Will's channel. I did a podcast with him recently. He's had loads and loads of incredible guests. the Art of Wellbeing podcast here with Dr. Will Cole. And also, again, check out his books. He's got some great books. I love your book, The Inflammation Spectrum. I think that's a great one because one of the things you get into is how inflammation is at the root of aging and a number of other conditions. I mean, cardio issues, of course. I think that diet is also excellent for balancing out blood sugar, as you mentioned. And man, just want to say thanks so much for coming on and sharing the wisdom today.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Well, everybody, hey, want to encourage you to subscribe, share, like the podcast. If there's anything in here that impacted your life in a positive way, hey, let us know. And again, want to thank Dr. Will Cole, my good friend here, for sharing his wisdom. And thank you all for listening and for being on mission with us to teach the world how to heal using natural medicine. We'll see y'all next week. God bless.